Say again?
Are you dealing with anything else unexpected?
Well, the heat, all of a sudden, the heat is turning into kind of a unexpected, kind of minor heat wave here, so I have to do extra watering.
Now, when
Uh,
you when
Ah,
you say when you say a heat wave, you talking about just today or for the last few days, Wally?
I'd say for the last few days, definitely the last 4 or 5 days, we've been having, I'd say, above seasonal. I mean, considering it's only early June, we don't normally get this kind of, we're in the plus high 20s, I think possibly even the low 30s, 31 possibly. I haven't checked the weather today yet,
You
but
mean
I know
Celsius, 20s and 30s
Celsius,
Celsius, yeah.
high 20s.
High 20s, low 30s Celsius. What is that in Fahrenheit? Who knows? Anyone out there know the conversion rate? What's high 20s, low 30s? Is that like 70s, 80s?
I'd say it's more like in the 80s is my guess. Addie would know. There you go.
Colorado, Kale says that's 80s and 90s in Colorado.
Yeah, so it's kind of difficult to get anything done in midday when it's like this. I mean, the heat is just so intense. You can only go out there for maybe an hour, do something, and then get back into,
Yeah.
inside for a bit. So it's somewhat challenging for
Man,
sure.
we really are talking about the weather here today. We are literally talking about the weather. Well, for people who grow veggies, that's important. Rex says it's been over 100 in Boise the last few days. Oh, man. There's
So
all
that's
kinds of
awesome.
bad news. This is a perfect session for all you bad news bears out there. And I think this is going to be an awesome instant learning series that Wally put together for you all. So really, let's go ahead and get started. We are recording. We are live. And if you can see my screen, give me a 2. All right, good. We are live. So what are we talking about here today, Wally? I mean, this is, you put down here, dealing with day-to-day dynamics. Aren't we really just talking about the fact that things never really go as planned?
Well, it's just it. I mean, you have your, I mean, we've had quite a few open houses where we've discussed, you know, your grand plan, what you want, your targeted revenue, what kind of areas you're going to be putting into play, and that's your, strategic plan. And then all of a sudden, you have to make all these, to use a militaristic term, you have to make these tactical uh, adjustments to your day-to-day realities. And often they're quite unpredictable, as anyone here on the discussion here knows. I mean, some stuff you have to deal with, and you have to make your adjustments. So it's like a chess game to a certain degree. Your adversary is everything else that's trying to take you out in terms of production, and you're basically trying to put things in play that's going to overcome your adversarial type, to use that analogy, adversarial type uh, conditions.
Okay, so if we're talking about an adversary, and by the way, I don't know if you can all see the picture. Can you see the chessboard there of Wally looking down, playing against an invisible opponent? Or were you playing against yourself on both sides there, Wally, or is that supposed to be Mother Nature in the corner there against you?
I'd say it could even be my own self. Sometimes I have to, make sure that, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
So
get it. I get it. All right. So, real quick before we move on, I want to know how many of you out there had things, whether catastrophic or just a nuisance level, happen already this year to you. Rex, I see yours already that your lettuce is not germinating. But go ahead. I mean, if something's happened to you already this year, give me a yes in the chat box there. And if you feel like telling us what went wrong, let us know. Um, oh, geez, rabbits. We already got rabbits coming in. People are saying yes, yes, and yes. Now we got a yes and a yes. All right. Well, that's what we're here to talk about. Is a lot of things can go wrong, And as Wally was kind of describing them as an adversary or an opponent, we're going to list a few. And actually, Addy has a couple of big challenges that he was having, a little bit opposite of what you have as pictures here. And he was going to get on and talk about what he's been going through for the last couple of weeks as well. And we may have another special guest as well. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your opponents here when we're thinking about and planning for disasters, the worst, and just having backup plans. So, you put a couple of great pictures on here about, weeds. You put some stuff in here about, your well, so water, and then sometimes not having enough, and then sometimes having too much. So do you want to kind of just review those real quick?
I mean, everyone has to deal with weeds, and the biggest issue I think is perennial weeds. There's a wide variety, so I mean, you've got to make calculations on how you're dealing with your weed pressure.
I'm sorry,
Sometimes,
Wally, we're losing you there in volume. What were you saying?
well, you just have to make your calculations in terms of how you're going to deal with the weed pressure. Sometimes it's overwhelming, and you might have to give up an area. That's happened to me on occasion. So I try to make things manageable. And, everyone has to deal with water issues, capacity of well. I'd say pressure isn't that big of an issue unless you run a lot of sprinklers. But, I had one of the owners of the peri-urban site say, well, I hope the water holds up. And, here I am planting winter squash, and I kind of reduced my planting there just to kind of accommodate that type of, possibility. And I do very little watering. I've got a method down where I just basically hand water around the plant in what's called a well. It's like a crater, so I'm able to apply water pretty efficiently. Drainage, I haven't, that was a unique situation on that property there on the top right. That was totally unexpected. I'm not sure if that property is dried up adequately, but I know we gave that up fairly quick because, I mean, that was catastrophic there. We put a lot into it. It was a fairly big plot, I think about 2,000 square feet. So, but we had multiple sites in town, so we just made our adjustment.
Okay. So, not only is it weather and water, it could be, like you mentioned, your landlord, something might change. They might sell the property or have a change of heart. And you could also have issues with your labor pool, right?
Absolutely. I'm not that reliant on outside labor right now. Basically, I've got it down where if I have a person helping me for maybe at the peri-urban site, not here at home, but just with watering and weeding, maintenance type stuff for maybe 2 to 4 hours a week, that's all I need. And I have, different types of arrangements. Sometimes I've paid cash. A lot of the time they don't want cash, they just want produce, or I've got a lot of credits with vendors at markets, so they might get some wild boar meat, whatever, so I make arrangements with them. And again, landlords can be unpredictable, even though they can be extremely helpful. You just don't know what's going to happen on a year-to-year basis. That's why it's a good idea to kind of spread yourself out a little bit and do the multi-locational thing. I had an owner. I was going up to a peri-urban site to clean out it was a pretty rough piece of garden because it was in drought mode last year. Wasn't able to do good weed control, so I went up there. I was going to, with another person, we were going to do some work. I said, hi, how you doing? And she said, pretty good. I just sold the property. So I didn't even get a heads up in that case. So she said, you don't even have to bother cleaning up because, I mean,
right.
So whoever, so I mean, unpredictable things like that, just unbelievable sometimes. But there is like element of stability. You have, if you're multi-locational, you'll find year after year you're able to maintain your production by basically just kind of moving your pieces around, right?
Right. Well, that's a great transition, Wally. And I want to know just from all the folks that are actually have joined us. We've got quite a few actually out there today. Have any of you had landlord or land-related problems where whoever owns the land suddenly changed their mind or sold the property and you had to leave? If it was city property, did you ever have problems with them? And I'd like to know if anyone's had any of those problems before. I know that we have a few of our members that have talked about that, but I'd like to know how common that is. And especially the folks that are using other people's property. Have you had any kind of issues there? Even if it was they decided that they wanted to start using fertilizer, or something that you had agreed not to, so you can use the property anymore. And before I switch the slides here, I want to just mention this piece that you talked about with changing demographics and changing sales channels. You could have a farmer's market shut down or not approve you, because it looks like someone mentioned a little bit earlier that they didn't get into one of the markets that they were looking to get into. And you could be in that market and then the following year not get in that market. Or you might find that if you had a roadside stand, somebody comes along and says you can't have your stand here anymore for whatever reason. So those things do change for sure. If we are losing our plots, and let's talk a little bit about those. You were saying here that you, that you have lost some plots in the past, and that you now expect to lose plots on a regular basis. Is that right, Wally?
I'd say, well, the big thing that happened this year on the top left was, I had a pretty good production garden there, as you can see, nice patch of potatoes, onions. That's all gone. I lost that, so have to make up for it in other ways. And we do have an extended land base, Gail and I, so there's ways that we can make up for it. And I had to turn that kind of seemed like a onerous thing into a blessing in disguise, because I think I might have stretched myself too thin for a couple of years there, so I'm kind of glad I lost that plot. Urban plot bottom left there, that's at my uncle's. Basically became unfeasible to garden there anymore, even though it was actually highly productive for many years. Just some issues arose that can't really deal with in terms of what I need to do there, so I had to make up for that. But I should say also that losing plots you can always be gaining plots. So a lot of the times in this time of the year you might get somebody that comes up to you and says, look, I've got a garden plot, it's 2,000 square feet, do you want it? That's happened quite a few times in the past. So the shifting dynamics of plots, that's always changing, especially if you're multi-locational.
Right. So I think the moral of the story is that change is constant. Jared chimed in that he lost 1,500 square foot plot this spring by surprise, and another homeowner said that he's planning a house addition so that their plot won't be available in 2017. And for him, change seems constant. For you, change is constant. But the way to look at it is, especially when you lose some of those that you might have been stretched too thin, or some that had a lot of weed pressure or were further away, as how do we turn it into an advantage? And so I love the plan that you lined up for us here, which is making up for the lost plots. What are some of the things that you can do? So obviously you can look for a new plot, but if you're always looking for a new plot, as past members have talked about, you can have people call you randomly, and you can put them on back order and go back and reach out to them as soon as you need it. But there's other suggestions that you had, which is scaling down the amount of land that you're actually using and becoming more efficient. So do you want to talk about those, Wally?
Yeah, that's something I'm doing right now. Like at my home plot here, I'm going to be converting a lot of the non-soil areas, basically patio areas and compost bin areas, which I'm going to lit up and use those as the foundation for container gardens. Alongside the garage, that's going to be container gardens. So I'm setting everything up so that to make up for stuff that I had, let's say, at a peri-urban site last year, like my cucumbers, I'm going to have all that in town here, and I'll be able to take better care of it because I'll be here every day. So intensify your current production on your current land base. That might include more relay cropping, and like I say, putting areas into production that would normally be put in production, like for container goods. Um, and also like bottom left there, that's in Pleasantdale. Um, we put some of the adjacent. I think Jared's doing a version of this with the just putting some property. I think in this case it was the town. They let us put some land into production. Same sort of, like I say, same sort of scenario as Jared, who's got that area that he's put into place. So that's an example. And just unlikely areas like, back alley sunchoke production. Doesn't look like much, but it's actually very aesthetic, and at the end of the season it does produce some, valuable artichokes that go for about $10 a pound here. So there's a lot of different ways to make up for lost plots.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just a tactical question. Rex wants to know about how do you water back alley area? Just a hose, right?
Yeah, I mean, I normally don't water back. I mean, in that case, sunchokes are more or less drought tolerant, so I don't drag a hose back there. Basically, it's on its own. We do have some regular rainfalls. So it's not completely arid here, but
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean.
And John, I think that that the problems with owners wanting visual appeal or expecting things to look different, I think that's a great question, and it's something that we're going to address in a couple of weeks with our next member meetup. Just talking about how to set expectations correctly with your quote-unquote landlords. But I think that's a really good question, and I'm sure it has come up in the past, especially if there have been any challenges. But for sure, definitely. How many of you out there are already using relay cropping? Just give me a yes or a one if you are. So, okay, I'm just looking at the ones and the yeses coming in. If you're not, give me an N for no, that you're not using relay cropping right now. Be honest. Thank you, Martha. That is hilarious, John. John's example of relay cropping was rabbits followed by groundhogs. No, we're talking about the spin definition, but that is great. I know that there's more than 6 of you out there, so the rest of you, if you're not doing relay cropping, give us an N if you're not out there. Or excuse me, if you're not using relay cropping. Okay, got it. So I think there's definitely people out there that are not using relay cropping, which is, I think it's kind of the next evolution and step for a lot of folks that have started with us, and a lot of our members that are already growing but aren't quite there yet. And there is just a lot of room to become more efficient with the land that we have. So you're right, this can be a blessing and surprise for sure. So here's some other ideas which I liked, not totally unthinkable, but it's nice to see them here. Earth boxes you have here on top of a compost bin. So earth boxes basically in vertical stacks or up higher. Is that right?
Yeah, in that case, yeah, those were peppers put on top of that compost area, which is actually quite large for a backyard compost area. I think 16 feet by 4 feet for 4 separate boxes, or 5 4 by 4 boxes. And one of the nice things about using something like a compost bin is that, once you elevate something, something like cucumbers can actually, you don't have to trellis them so much as just let them cascade down. So I've got some of these copper. They were used for wire. They're like a pedestal, about 2.5 feet high. So I'm going to be using a lot of those for cucumber production. Basically, place them on top, let them cascade down instead of trellising, and that way you get a better land use by making use of that vertical area. when it cascades down. Containers, I got that from an old on top right, from an urban gardening project that was located actually in an adjacent building. The farmer's market was being built, and they just had some containers that we decided to take because they looked like they could work. Spent a lot of time actually digging the dirt out, taking them to the site. I don't know if I'd do that all over again, that's for sure. But they did have their places, so they put some areas that wouldn't normally be put into production there. In the middle photo, you can see the sidewalk area there by the garage. I'll be putting stuff there, probably tomatoes and or you'll see about cucumbers, but it's going to be some kind of hot, warm weather crop. And then backyard greenhouses. I've used these quite a bit, and they come in handy. They're less than 100 square feet in size. I've got 4 of them, which I have to see about how I'm going to use those because I'm just not quite sure yet. I have to get stuff in the ground out back first, and then I'll see what kind of how they're going to be useful in terms of production. So again, just one of those things you have to constantly recalculate.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm liking all these. Does anyone have any questions on using these different these different types of containers? If you do, send them on over because I mean they're fairly straightforward, but there's got to be some complexities here that are a little bit different. The one that I love is the garden tower. I love the concept of just growing up, and you put in here some trellising as well, and growing on perimeter fences, and of course the indoor trays on grow tables, which you can actually stack, or like the design that you have in the background there, having multiple stacks, which I think is great. The growing on the perimeter fencing is just so interesting. What types of crops do well with trellising or perimeter fences like that?
Well, in that case, that's actually one of the peri-urban sites that I lost this year. But when we did do that, we just basically planted some winter squash close to the fence, and then it just did its own thing. Even though some of those winter squash looked like they weighed about 10 or 15 pounds, they were able to support themselves on that fence. It was actually quite amazing. And it's a big tradition in a lot of, I know Asians or Chinese are big into vertical trellising. I've seen, squashes, winter squash, grow up the side of a garage and right onto the roof. So you can do some pretty amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, the grow table, that's a big thing. I think everyone should have some version of the grow table just to maintain consistency and year-round production of, in my case, pea greens.
Yeah.
And that garden tower,
Yeah, go ahead. The garden tower.
it's a fairly complex. I'm not sure what kind of commercial application it has. I mean, that was from a guy that I got to know at farmer's market who's selling in an adjacent area. And I'd say something like that might be geared more towards home production, but it's a pretty cool looking thing. The person can use that to, I know garden towers are big. Vertical growing is big right now on a commercial basis, but I haven't been able to really implement. But we are doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah. Rex mentions that they're really expensive, which they are. Agreed, Rex. The intercropping, John's got an interesting comment question here. He says, intercropping to increase density, i.e. greens, in between longer duration plants like peppers and tomatoes. And then it says, early beets in the area where the squash will grow into. So it's kind of like a staggering, I think is what John's getting at, to stagger crops that will produce quickly and then can basically get out of the way for plants that take longer, like squash. And then the squash kind of grow into that area.
Yeah, I think it's a great concept. I mean, John discussed that before, and I give him credit for kind of having that as an important part of his system. I'm going to try a version of that. I'm going to be planting a lot of those earth boxes into tomatoes, basically 2 tomato plants per earth box with spacing. Right now, the tomato plants are fairly small, so I figure I've got quite a bit of room there for, let's say, onion sets, which will probably be ready in about 30 days, and I can basically make use of that space. So that's a creative adjustment to intensification. There's no question about that. That's a good one.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, very good. All right, so let's keep it moving. And this is some ideas around the quick green backyard plot, moving towards high value products. And this was really the idea that if you lose a plot, maybe you can turn some of the others into to recreate the revenue with some different higher value products that turn around quickly. Is that right, Wally?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've made my adjustment right now with the indoor pea shoot production. But on the top left there, you can see the outdoor quick green production, peas, radish, and sunflower. And you can see the demographic there on the bottom right. Burly looking guys usually don't go for, let's say, microgreens and pea shoots. It's usually, I would say, women. Um, High value product, each one of those bags, I mean, that was harvested from one bed, standard bed of radish, and you're looking at, well, I don't know, 60, 70 bags there, I think, at $2 a bag, or $2.50 a bag at that time. So, and that's in 10 days. And yeah, chefs are good. I mean, right now I've kind of changed my restaurant chef model. Basically, I only sell to chefs that come to market. I do deliveries, but right now I have a handful of chefs that do buy at market, and to me it's a more sustainable model, but just because I don't have to make, extra deliveries. So, I mean, they can be very important customers, there's no question about that. And, try to drive them to your farmer's market is my suggestion. And a lot of chefs are into it. They do want to come to the farmer's market, check things out, and they come from certain traditions where, that's what they do. They come to market and buy stuff.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Okay, so a couple of just warnings and examples from folks, from members that they're having here, and that is be open to the unexpected. You put in here new plots, so you want to cover those from each person?
Um,
Because we got Carrie Fox here.
yeah, Carrie, I think, had to make a quick adjustment. I can see she's got her BCS there, so she was able to put that into production fairly quickly, I assume. Um, I think Clean State Farms, Caroline was going to hold back on putting that entire area into production. So that's not necessarily a bad idea, but there are crops that, are fairly easily managed. I'm thinking potatoes and winter squash, so I mean, I would look at the idea of, putting that entire half acre in, but again, you have to make the adjustment or the calculation. I'm not going to overstretch myself, and if you don't put it into a production in its entirety, then you got to think about what's the management going to be on that area that you don't put in production. Are you going to, put some kind of ground cover on it? So I mean that enters into it, and David Elias, I think. I'm not sure if you got that garden plot this year, but I mean, again, it's the same equation. You're always getting new garden plots, and you just have to be prepared to make, quick adjustments, but you also have to be prepared to say no, and you have to be prepared to lose plots. So there's, like I say, only the best plots survive. Eventually, you do multi-locational gardening or even single locational. Certain strategies survive over time, and only the best logistics survive. So, you're always tweaking your game, and you just have to, it's not something you're going to figure out in your first year. You're going to learn a lot in your first year, there's no question about that, and then you're going to make your adjustments for many of the crops in your second year. learning curve is very quick for certain crops like the quick greens. You can, more or less become well acquainted with quick green production, very quickly. But some of the other crops you have to wait for next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think, kind of looking at this is that, there's serendipity often when, be open to them. New plots can open up that are closer or better or cheaper or whatever. Um, let's see here. We have we have a little bit about losing help. You want to talk a little bit about this, kind of your experience with losing help and what you did?
Well, again, it's just like garden plots. You lose help and you gain help. I'm getting a little bit of help from Hannah, who's willing to commit to about 2 to 3 hours once a week until the end of June. So you can see her there digging up a garden plot, which was very helpful because I don't think I would have had the fortitude, to be honest, to put that thing into production. That required a lot of hand digging. So, she's a younger, strong person. So I thought, okay, let's just get this area dug up. I did lose Brian Hall, who helped me out quite a bit last year, but again, I have to make my own adjustments, and I kind of scaled back a bit in terms of the maintenance levels at that plot where you see Brian at right now. We put in, actually that's this year, we put in potatoes, fairly easy to maintain. I've got another person that's willing to help for maybe 3 hours per week. That's all I need out there is just a little bit of help with watering and maintenance, just so I don't have to be out there for 5 or 6 hours. All I have to do is be out there for maybe 2 to 3 hours at most. I mean, at the top left there, I was that was from a urban farm group that there was about 10 people involved there, and I helped them out quite a bit with just kind of planning out their, container garden thing and just giving them some advice or whatever. And decided, look, we want to help. One day we'll come do something for you. And sure enough, they came. We put that entire area into winter squash in about 3 hours. So that came in pretty handy, but I knew I wasn't going to have that every year. And again, I don't necessarily want that kind of management involved. 10 people is a lot of people to manage. So, I just like it better when you have 1 or 2 people with you at most, and for short, work sessions. So, like I say, lost help is always, you can make your adjustments. You can always find new help.
Yeah.
So just it.
Yeah. Okay. And part of this, I think, is also that you might want to keep other lots backed up and other people backed up for when you need it, quickly. So let's talk a little bit about the changing demographics and sales channels that we talked about a little bit earlier. What can happen when your market kind of changes its demographics or the rules?
Well, we're going to find out very quickly. Right now, that condo complex is already, people are starting to move in, so I'm on the marketing committee, and we've made certain initiatives to make sure that those people come to the farmers market, given them somewhere like 50 feet away from the condo complex. We gave them gift baskets, so we're staying on top of it by organizing different initiatives to make sure that they actually came to us and they said, we want to see the farmers market be successful and we want to work with you. I'm guessing they probably even maybe use the farmers market as part of the sell on those condos. Who wouldn't want to live next to a farmers market? So it's kind of reciprocal. They want to be successful, and so do the vendors. So it's just a matter of getting a feel for the demographics. We're not still quite sure what the demographics of that condo complex are going to be. Whether we were kind of figuring more well-off people in their mid-30s to, let's say, late 50s or whatever. But I've seen younger people in their 20s moving in, so we're going to find out very quickly what the demographics are as we start interacting with them. But again, it takes initiative. I mean, it helps that we have a marketing committee. I made a post in the BYR forum about, how many farmers markets have a marketing committee, and we meet twice a week. And it suddenly occurred to me that we might be doing something unique here, or maybe not. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what kind of people have had, with the organized organizational structure of their farmers markets in terms of, let's say having a marketing committee and just outreaching to different groups around. So that's the challenge. You got to take the initiative to a large degree.
Yeah, got it. Okay. What about, anything about the folks changing, your kind of customers changing? How are you changing your crop repertoire based on that?
Well, I mean, every vendor is going to have their sort of hardcore base that they can rely on year after year. So you just have to, just tone it down to, what they need, but and are willing to buy, but you don't necessarily want to go too far out there and grow stuff that you're not necessarily good at growing, like let's say cauliflower in my case, or broccoli in my case, or I've had to make a lot of adjustments. I've tried a lot of initiatives, but like I say, you got to be able to satisfy yourself to a large degree. I mean, at a farmer's market, a customer can always go to another vendor and get what they need. If they can, if they're looking for baby cabbage, I've tried that a few times, and that's something I would want to do again. But other vendors, they can do it, and so that's why it's good to have more than one, more than a lot of vendors at a farmer's market. That way, you're going to be more likely at satisfying customers. So it's
Yeah.
not so much, it's not competition, it's complementary.
Yeah, got it, got it. Okay, so what we're talking really about is being dynamic, backup plots, backup labor, considering, always the option that, if you lose land, there's ways to become more efficient. You might lose people, there might be ways to become more efficient. And your sales channels, if they change, being flexible there, being open to and thinking about what you need to do to become a little more flexible. I love the idea of selling your microgreens and then turning your microgreens into pestos. That was a great session that we had with I'm sorry, Roxanne. What was I'm blanking right now on the Queen of Microgreens. Remember meetup that we had.
That was Mary Ackley,
Mary.
and I think I see her in the house today. I think she's
Hold
here
on,
today.
Mary. Are you here? Let's see if Mary's here. I don't see her here, unfortunately, on there. I do see Linda. Linda's on there. I know Linda would probably have some comments here, but if you have folks going a little more upscale, taking it, putting it together, and offering it, beyond just the straight crop, and doing some value added, process to adding them to the value added process to the vegetables. Addie adds puts together a ratatouille type of package, and you could sell that for more than if you were to sell each of the pieces individually. So sometimes, looking at your customer and seeing what they want and what they're willing to pay for really can be helpful there. Okay, so moving on. Any questions so far, by the way? We haven't heard much in the last few minutes. Want to know if there's any questions. Indoor market or outdoor market, I think this is another element of probably needing to test both. But let's talk a little bit about the outdoor stand, the pluses and the minuses for people that are thinking through this as well.
Well, I mean, I experimented last year with the entire summer selling outdoors, and I'm not going to do it again. It's just too grueling in terms of having to do the stand setup, stand takedown, and then having to deal with weather extremes, wind, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, a lot of the times you don't have that option. I mean, I'm fortunate that I belong to a farmer's market where I can set up indoors, and at the top left, on the top there, that's where I am now. I'm indoors, and I'm going to stay indoors. That way I won't lose track of my customers. They know exactly where I am. I don't have to deal with weather extremes. So yeah, there's a lot of pluses and minuses with both. But I'd say right now I'm pretty happy being back indoors. And like I say, for the foreseeable future, I'm going to stay indoors. But if you're outdoors, then you definitely have to have the right gear. You got to make sure you have clothing, especially during the cooler times of the season. That can be pretty odious if you're not dressed properly. You got to have a strong canopy, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more things to consider for an outdoor stand setup than possibly for an indoor. In this case, this is a permanent indoor stand setup. I don't even have to take that down. Other vendors that are located indoors have to take their stand down. So, I mean, I'm not going to give that up again. So,
And what about, and really, what about the difference though in revenue, at least where you are? You mentioned here that outdoors you tend to be able to sell to people a little more serious, and they're not just out for a stroll to look around.
well, that's true. I think sales might be a little bit better outside. I think I had it 20% better outside, but again, what you have to go through, at least in my case, I mean, other people wasn't so much a problem, but I was new to it. I'm not getting younger. I'm getting, what. So I found it to be a little bit odious in terms of what it took to, do that stand setup and the takedown, setting up the canopy. Right now, another thing that enters the calculation, and I think Addie's brought it up before, is that new condo complex is located on the other side of the building, so indoor vendors are going to have access to those condo people, flowing through. So I think that's going to make up for any possible lost sales, and just keep on working on the marketing. Just
That's
indoor
great.
is a good place, and given that I have that option, I think not everyone's going to have that option. So, like I say, you have to be prepared for anything.
Yeah. So we are on our second to last slide here, and we're going to talk a little bit about this shift to peri-urban versus rural plots and a little bit what you did. And Jared's asking that we talk a little bit about pest challenges, which I think are a major component here. So let's talk quickly about your use and your relocation for this year of your production to peri-urban and rural plots.
Well, there's always issues, right? I mean, Gail in Manitoba has issues with deer, so she's made adjustments there. She intercrops actually dill and cilantro, and she finds the deer don't necessarily like being around highly fragrant plants like that, so that's helped. So she has made her own adjustments. I don't necessarily have a lot of insect issues unless we have a very dry season. We start getting grasshopper pressure, which is always possible. But right now, I've got it down to crops that don't necessarily give me a lot of trouble, and that's part of the honing process. Is that if you want to spend a lot of time with your crops that have the issues and are willing to do it, then you just have to hone your strategy over time. But I think Jared actually uses row covers. I think for his arugula is what I'm guessing. I drove by Jared's place a couple of days ago and I noticed row cover though. So Jared's got his own things that he's doing, to solve those issues. So everyone's got to basically, come up with their own solutions. Rabbits, I don't have a rabbit problem here, so I mean, but they sound like they can be a fairly significant problem. So, but there's always a solution. Every pest or every issue has some kind of a solution, I find.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay, so what kind of pests are you dealing with personally? And Jared, can you send over some of the different pests that you're concerned with? So for you, Wally, what kind of pests have you dealt with and how they impacted you, and what kind of changes have you made beyond just the deer that you were talking about on the rural areas?
anytime I've tried a certain category of vegetable, let's say primarily in the brassica family, to include cabbage, which are prone to cabbage larvae, which I mean, there's different ways to deal with those issues, but again, it's labor intensive. Flea beetles, I've had issues with flea beetles. And, if I do have a big problem with those, which I'm not going to have this year because I'm not growing any crops that are going to be prone to flea beetle damage. Um, Again, there's things you can do. Row cover, I'm pretty sure that's what Jared is dealing with right now. Um, like I said, I don't necessarily have a huge amount of issues. And when I did, it was when I sort of got out of my trouble-free crop repertoire. I started experimenting with new crops, then you're going to come up with new problems. So, but again, that takes a few years to come up with a crop repertoire that you can rely on a year-to-year basis. It's always good to experiment, of course, but um, there's always risks involved with new crops, definitely. But the rural plots basically means just kind of. I mean, I do have my home plot here, which I've said I'm going to be intensifying. And I've got the peri-urban site, and then Gail has property in a small town, and then she has her rural plot. So we're getting stuff in the ground, and we're pretty diverse. So I feel confident if something happens on one of these plots that we'll be able to make up for it somehow.
So we have a few here of pests that there are people were hoping to get some feedback on. Looper caterpillars on the lettuce and flea beetles on cabbage. And he's using a row cover as well. Jared is mentioning that. Any thoughts there?
Well, from what I hear, I've talked to quite a few vendors at market, and kale's another production, has a lot of production issues, with flea beetle and cabbage butterfly larvae or whatever, lopers. And I know people use row cover all summer and they grow stuff successfully all summer. So I think row covers are a big part of the solution, definitely. So I'm glad to see Jared is, using those. So yeah, I mean, there's other solutions, right? You can use BT. It's a kind of like uh, it's a virus, organic virus that gives, I think, the cabbage butterfly some kind of virus that it can't recover from. So, but that requires a regular spray routine. So if you're into it, that might be a solution. But like I say, you can go a long ways with row covers. But they are management intensive. You got to anchor them down well, and and so forth. So, but I know Jared would know about that. Anyone or Addy, I think Addy uses quite a bit of row covers in his operation too. So it's once you get the hang of it, it can be a pretty effective method.
Anyone else have any issues with bugs out there other than Kale, your teenage boys with pellet guns? I saw that there. Okay. Well, we're at the final slide, which is, isn't farming grand? I love these pictures. Some of these are great. Okay, any final questions? Want to get those out there before we wrap up for the day? Roxanne, any thoughts?
I know, I think John Greenwood and Audie are in the house, and I think they were planning to talk about some problems that they've had. I don't know if you want to try and bring them in.
Okay, let me see if I can. John, are you on? I think John and Addie, it looks like both are on here. Are you on right now, John, Addie?
I am.
I'm sorry, who's that? Is that Addie?
That's Audie.
Addie.
Hi, Addie.
Hi.
Okay, John, are you with us as well? Looks like nothing from John there yet. Okay, so Kale was wondering if flea beetles mainly are an aesthetic problem at all. Uh, any thoughts there?
Well, I would say, I
Um,
mean, go ahead, Addy.
I was going to say it depends on how many there are. If there are a lot of them, then they can damage the leaves enough that you can't sell them. Yeah, it really depends on the level of flea beetle pressure.
Okay, I'm not sure if that answered the question or not, but Kale mentioned that he has a lot of holes on the leaves, the kale, etc., but it doesn't seem to affect growth that much. It definitely can affect sales if they start to look like bugs have been growing on or been eating up your leaves there. Um, Addie, do you want to kind of go over what you've been dealing with and just for the last few days for everyone to kind of understand and let's talk a little bit about what you're doing to mitigate that.
Yeah. Well, can you hear me, Lux?
Yeah, we sure can.
Well, my main water source was cut off for about a week. So I had issues with irrigation. I had issues with washing vegetables for the market. So I had to ration my water use. I stopped all new planting. So I kept water just for irrigating existing plants. And then I bought a tank that could fit on my truck and I started hot water. So I was using that. And then when the water came back, I was on a boil water advisory. So it wasn't potable water. So I treated it with bleach to disinfect it. So I was washing the vegetables with that, and then I would do a final rinse with the clean water that I hauled in. So yeah, those are the things I had to do just to keep sales going, keep keep the plants going. But it delayed my planting quite a bit.
Okay. And where did you end up getting this large tank from?
I went to a company in Saskatoon that sells plastic tanks, like big tanks. This one this one is a 250-gallon tank that can fit on a pickup bed.
Well, that can definitely be a challenge. I mean, water's the lifeblood there. We
Yeah.
have some pictures here of a hoop house destroyed. Whose hoop house was this one here?
I don't think she's on the call today. That was Dawn Maxon's, and I don't know what state she's in, but I think it was the Midwest somewhere.
I thought that was Rex's.
No, I don't. Rex, that's not yours, is it? His was bigger, I think.
Any other questions here? It looks like Rex is saying he had to look twice, he said, but it wasn't his. John says some customers are aware that bug damage is an indication of organic growth and it can be a limited sales advantage. Well, that's the way to stay positive and turn it around there. I think that's great. Any
It's
other
true.
final questions before we go? Roxanne, any final thoughts?
No, I think we'd like your thoughts on whether we should continue these sort of problem-solving sessions and how we can improve them. So if you have any thoughts, just put them in the forum or you can email me directly.
Okay, great. Well, we are 3 minutes away from top of the hour, so let's go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone today, especially Roxanne for all the work that you do in putting these together, and Wally for all your knowledge that you impart to everyone and sharing here. Thanks for all the work that's going into this, and really wanted to thank Addie. I know it was a last minute that you had something going on there, but we really appreciate jumping in and helping us out. And we'll definitely have you on for the next one for sure. We're glad that you were able to figure out the water solution there, and I know it impacted you in a lot of different ways. But thanks, everyone, and if you can send a quick thank you out to Roxanne and Wally for the work, we really appreciate it. We read all your comments, and we want to just say thank you for your trust as well. We'll talk to you all.
Our next member meetup is Friday. It's a Friday, June 24th, and it's with Marcus Reidner in Calgary, and he has a very interesting story in that he's selling through a collective. And I know co-ops and collectives are gaining a lot of interest, and more and more people are trying to establish them. So if you're interested in how a collective works, he'll be able to tell you that. And he also practices the multi-locational model, and he has it down to a science. So he's the only farmer besides Wally, I think, that actually tracks his work rate by the minute. So he's going to have a lot of stats for you too.
That's great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one. Tell your friends.
That's Friday, June 24th.
Yeah, this one will be public, so anyone can join on this one. We're excited. All right, we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you online. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, see ya.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye, Addie.
Bye.